Nell Bridges Hall, born September 8, 1954, is an American civil rights activist. She was the first African-American child to desegregate the all-white William Frantz Elementary School in Louisiana during the New Orleans school desegregation crisis on November 14, 1960. She is the subject of a 1964 painting, The Problem We All Live By Norman Rockwell. After this message, we'll get more into details about Ruby Bridges. I want to talk a little bit about a new affiliate, Nagast Footwear. They are a Black-owned company that makes some of the best quality shoes, clothes, and hats that I've seen in a very long time. They are designed to empower customers and to teach self-love, self-respect, and self-confidence. I've purchased some of their footwear, and they have lasted me well over a year. Nagast Footwear makes sneakers, running shoes, slippers, boots, hats, and clothing. I love my slippers. I love my sneakers. Even game show contestants love my sneakers. Click my affiliate link below to visit their site to browse and to shop. Every purchase helps me grow this platform. Bridges was the eldest of 5 children born to, and I believe I'm pronouncing this correctly, if not, I apologize, Abon and Lucille Bridges during the middle of the Civil Rights Movement. Brown versus Board of Education was decided 3 months and 22 days before Bridges' birth. The court ruling declared the process of separating schools for Black children and white children unconstitutional. Though the Brown versus Board of Education decision was finalized in 1954, Southern states were extremely resistant to the decision that they must integrate within 6 years. Many white people of the time did not want schools to be integrated, and though it was a federal ruling, state governments were not doing their part in enforcing the new laws. In 1957, federal troops were ordered to Little Rock, Arkansas to escort the Little Rock 9 students in combating violence that occurred as a result of the decision. Under significant pressure from the federal government, the New Orleans Parish School Board administered an entrance exam to the students at Bridges School with the intention of keeping Black children out of the white schools. As a child, Ruby spent much time taking care of her younger siblings, though she also enjoyed playing jump rope, softball, and climbing trees. When she was 4 years old, the family relocated from Tylertown, Mississippi, where Bridges was born, to New Orleans, Louisiana. In 1960, when she was 6 years old, her parents responded to a request from the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, better known as NAACP, and volunteered her to participate in the integration of the New Orleans school system, even though her father was hesitant. Bridges was one of 6 Black students in New Orleans to pass the test that determined whether they could go to the all-white William Frantz Elementary School. 2 of the 6 decided to stay at their old school. Bridges went to Frantz by herself, and 3 children were transferred to McDonough No. 19 and became known as the McDonough 3. Bridges and her mother were escorted to school by 4 federal marshals during the first day that Bridges attended William Frantz Elementary. In the following days of that year, federal marshals continued to escort Bridges, though her mom stayed behind to take care of her younger siblings. As soon as Bridges entered the school, white parents pulled their own children out. All the teachers, except for one, refused to teach while the Black child was enrolled. Only one person agreed to teach Bridges, and that was Barbara Henry from Boston, Massachusetts. And for over a year, Henry taught her alone, as if she were teaching a whole class. That first day, Bridges and her mother spent the entire day in the principal's office. The chaos of the school prevented their moving to the classroom until the second day. On the second day, however, a white student broke the boycott and entered the school. When a 34-year-old Methodist minister, Lloyd Anderson Foreman, walked his 5-year-old daughter, Pam, through the angry mob saying, "I simply want the privilege of taking my child to school." A few days later, other white parents began bringing their children and the protests began to subside. Yet still, Bridges remained the only child in her class, as she would until the following year. Every morning, as Bridges walked to school, one woman would threaten to poison her, while another held up a Black baby doll in a coffin. Because of this, the U.S. Marshals dispatched by President Eisenhower, who were overseeing her safety, allowed Bridges to eat only the food that she brought from home.
Was that hard for you, Barbara?
Well, it was so wonderful to have a little student like Ruby that it really made it a pleasure. It was a sad time indeed. And it was an anxious time.
Was it a surprise to you when nobody
yes,
came to class?
I assumed I would be teaching a class. And so we had a grand time together, I think, side by side, just the two of us spent the year together.
I was told to go downstairs, and then, as if sort of on signal, those doors opened, and then in their midst was this precious little child. And as I went over to greet her, her brown eyes, just rose up to meet mine, and oh, mercy, it was just love at first sight. 2 days before, on a Friday evening, I received a call from the superintendent of schools asking me if I would like to take a first grade. And then, to my surprise, it evolved quite differently. To drive up to the school that morning and witness this crowd, people yelling. There were a lot of placards with all kinds of sayings, some even from the Bible. I was so stunned by the reaction to what was happening. I could not believe people would treat anyone like that, particularly a child. By November 15th, there were no children left in the school. They were all gone.
Now, let's break for a second. Now, you notice that none of these people saw anything wrong with terrorizing a 6-year-old child. This was domestic terrorism, and the government did nothing, just like what happens now. The sad part is, there are plenty of people here who still feel the same way these horrible people did. Anyways, back to Ruby. Child psychiatrist Robert Coles volunteered to provide counseling to Bridges during her first year at France. He met with her weekly in the Bridges home, later writing a children's book, The Story of Ruby Bridges, to acquaint other children with Bridges' story. Coles donated the royalties from the sale of that book to the Ruby Bridges Foundation to provide money for school supplies or other educational needs for impoverished New Orleans school children. The Bridges family suffered for their decision to send her to William Frantz Elementary. Her father lost his job as a gas station attendant. The grocery store the family shopped at would no longer let them shop there. Her grandparents, who were sharecroppers in Mississippi, were turned off their land, and Abon and Lucille Bridges separated. Bridges has noted that many others in the community, both black and white, showed support in a variety of ways. Some white families continued to send their children to France despite the protests. A neighbor provided her father with a new job, and local people babysat, watched the house with protectors, and walked behind the federal marshal's car on the trips to school. It was not until Bridges was an adult that she learned that the immaculate clothing she wore to school in those first weeks at France was sent to her family by a relative of Coles. In 1999, Ruby formed the Ruby Bridges Foundation in New Orleans. Ruby's foundation promotes tolerance, respect, and appreciation of people's differences. Through education, the Ruby Bridges Foundation strives to end racism. Now let's look at some of her accolades. On January 8, 2001, Bridges was awarded the Presidential Citizens Medal by President Bill Clinton. In November 2006, Bridges was honored as a Hero Against Racism at the 12th Annual Anti-Defamation League Concert Against Hate with the National Symphony Orchestra held at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. In November 2007, the Children's Museum of Indianapolis unveiled a new permanent exhibit documenting her life, along with the lives of Anne Frank and Ryan White. The exhibit, called The Power of Children Making a Difference, cost $6 million to install and includes an authentic recreation of Bridges' first grade classroom. In 2010, Bridges had a 50th year reunion at William Frantz Elementary with Pam Foreman Tostriot, who had been, at the age of 5, the first white child to break the boycott that ensued from Bridges' attendance at the school. On July 15, 2011, Bridges met with President Barack Obama at the White House, and while viewing the Norman Rockwell painting of her on display, he told her, "I think it's fair to say that if it hadn't been for you guys, I would not be here and we wouldn't be looking at this together." The Rockwell painting was displayed in the West Wing of the White House, just outside the Oval Office from June through October 2011. On May 19, 2012, Bridges received an honorary degree from Tulane University at the annual graduation ceremony at the Superdome. 2 elementary schools are named after Bridges, one in Alameda, California, and the other in Woodinville, Washington. A statue of Bridges stands in the courtyard of William Frantz Elementary School. Now, as stated previously, Ruby Bridges is not the only one to go through this hatred as a child. Various places across the U.S. had to deal with this. Here are some other examples from that time frame. Now, let me be honest for a minute. None of this is a surprise. These hateful, racist people are still doing the same thing right now. Many of those racially insensitive people who were trying to keep darker-skinned children out of schools that their white children were attending had their own children. Those poor children were innocent until the evil of racism raised them with hate for other humans, and could be the same racially insensitive people trying to hide the truth about what this country and their own parents did to darker-skinned people by fighting to get the truth banned from school curriculums, therefore erasing the true history of racism against darker-skinned people. They have taken critical race theory and allowed their own ignorance of the reality to fuel their favorite racist politicians into manipulating them yet again and completely lying about what critical race theory is.
It's impossible that you're the stupid.
These racist voters would have a larger incentive if hiding this history prevented their racist family history from being exposed. America has no problem with the Holocaust being taught in schools. They have no issues talking about Israel. And they have the nerve and audacity to condemn other countries for inhumane violations of human rights when America has never stopped violating human rights within its own country, in particular darker-skinned people. The only difference is that the racists who are in control know this is going on, but also know that the majority of the voters in this country simply don't care what happens to the darker-skinned citizens. And the main reason for this is because it doesn't impact them, so why should they care? Why isn't there a huge push to erase the truth about America forcing Japanese people into internment camps during World War II simply because they were at war with Japan? Why isn't there a huge push to erase the truth about the indigenous people of this country? Well, it's simple. For those things, they have already convinced most people that the lies are the truth. These race haters keep telling us to get over slavery and these injustices, but many of them are blind to the fact their own historians have worked so hard to bury the truth about the history of darker-skinned people. Humanity is doomed to extinction unless we begin to realize that we are not each other's enemy. Make sure you subscribe, like, and share. Click the notification bell so you'll be notified when we upload new videos. Find The Awakening Frequency on Twitter, Instagram, and on Facebook. Research is key. Always do your own research and never just listen to what people tell you. We are The Awakening Frequency. Out of the millions of potential subscribers, we just want to reach one so each one can teach one. Peace.